Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, Christians attacked in Israel. We're going to bring you the story of an assault at a worship event in Jerusalem and how other Israelis are reacting to concern about violence. FBI Director Christopher Wray under fire from Republicans on Capitol Hill as they ask if the Bureau is being politicized and protecting the Biden family. We'll hear his response. Some good news for your wallet as inflation is falling, but is a recession on the way? We're going to take a look. And the hit film Sound of Freedom has brought the issue of child sex trafficking front and center. We're going to hear from the man known as the machine gun preacher about fighting trafficking in Africa and why it's also such a problem right here in the United States. All those stories and more today on CBN NewsWatch.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
Let's begin this half hour in Israel amid growing concerns about violence against Christians. Recently, for at least the second time in a month, a number of ultra-Orthodox Jews publicly confronted Christians and Messianic believers. The most recent happened outside a Hebrew worship event in Jerusalem. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, this time the hostility also led to physical attacks.
Inside the King of Kings congregation, some 800 people recently attended 2 concerts of Hebrew worship songs.
It was a night of worship and singing through the scriptures, singing through the Psalms. Everyone was invited, and we were very upfront about what this event was. That was important to us, that all of the people attending knew exactly what they were coming to through the purchase of tickets well before the event.
But outside, something else was going on.
So as the worshipers were trying to come in, the protesters would block them. They would get in their way. They would physically put their hands on them, put their body on them.
Senior pastor Chad Holland told CBN News protesters verbally and physically attacked those trying to attend the concert sponsored by the Messianic Jewish Alliance of Israel.
Several people that got harmed, they got accosted. We were being told of several people who got hurt. In addition to that, there was quite a loud noise-making group, and eventually this group of protesters, and we might even say violent protesters, grew to between 80 and 100 people.
While Holland commended police for bringing order, he felt more could have been done to prevent the situation.
We want to say thank you to the police. They did such a good job. They were so brave and courageous. All we would want is for the police to take it more seriously early on, to send more police early so we could avoid this whole event altogether.
One of Jerusalem's deputy mayors, Aryeh King, stood behind and supported the protesters, which included many teenagers and young men. Others cheered them on from above.
It's people who have a very warped view of what the Christian community is. They feel that most of the Christians in Jerusalem are there missionizing young Jews. I've tried to explain to them many times that that's not the case.
Another Jerusalem deputy mayor, Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, told CBN News she and other leaders tried to convince King what he was doing was wrong.
It was very negative, incendiary. The mayor condemned it, half the city council condemned it, and told him to his face that all he was doing is inciting hatred.
While she says the group is small, Hassan-Nahoum is still concerned about the violence against Christians.
Well, I would like to think that we do our utmost to protect all minorities. I've been involved in a campaign to get rabbis to condemn any type of violence or protests. So it's not the mainstream, and it's not even the mainstream Orthodox, and it's not even the mainstream national religious. It's a small, marginal group, a few bad apples that ruin the basket.
Phaedra Shapiro, who heads the Israel Center for Jewish-Christian Relations, sees it as democracy in action.
It was clear that the police were protecting the rights of concertgoers. I mean, this is still a democratic country, and that includes the democratic right to protest, so long as it doesn't harm law and order.
On the other hand, she's concerned about the growing dispute.
There is a growing polarization in Israel, and that really has nothing much to do with Jews and Christians, and everything to do with politics and a certain sector that feels emboldened to act in increasingly undemocratic and sometimes brutal ways.
While Israelis may be sensitive to the idea of missionary activity, Shapiro believes those who would protest a Christian event are relatively few. She also feels Israelis should turn their energies elsewhere.
I think that our mission as Jews in Israel, it seems to me, needs to be building a vibrant Jewish identity among our people and not protesting a music concert.
Holland emphasized that there was no intent to evangelize. He says what happened exposed people's hearts.
Worshippers were coming for one heart of love for God, love for one another, and the protesters had a different heart motive, and they didn't seem to care if someone was a man, a woman, a grown person, a child, an elderly person, or a baby. They didn't seem to care. They were going to promote this violence, make this noise, and again, we believe they were just grossly misinformed about what the whole event was.
The musical evening has been an event for years. Holland says he hopes next time they can come up with a way to make it just that. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, a contentious hearing in Congress with some Republicans accusing the FBI of using its resources for political purposes and asking if the Bureau is protecting the Biden family, while Democrats say Republicans are trying to protect former President Donald Trump. We're going to have that story for you when we come back. Republicans faced off against FBI Director Christopher Wray on Capitol Hill Wednesday, grilling him over allegations of politicizing the Bureau and bias against conservatives. Wray pushed back, highlighting the good work of the FBI and its dedication to public service. Caitlin Burke brings us this story.
We heard two very different messages coming from lawmakers on the House Judiciary Committee. Republicans listing off grievances with the FBI, and Democrats listing off grievances with their Republican colleagues.
American speech is censored, parents are called terrorists, Catholics are called radicals.
In his opening remarks, committee chair Jim Jordan repeatedly accused the FBI of using their resources for political purposes. Claims FBI Director Christopher Wray forcefully denied.
My expectation for all of our investigations, repeatedly communicated to all of our people, and this is especially important in sensitive investigations, is that our folks take great pains to be rigorous, professional, objective, following all our policies and procedures, and do the work in the right way.
Republicans repeatedly brought up the Hunter Biden investigation.
Are you protecting the Bidens?
Absolutely not. The FBI does not and has no interest in
You won't answer the question about whether or not
politically.
that's a shakedown, and everybody knows why you won't answer it.
Democrats, meanwhile, accused Republicans of using the oversight hearing to protect former President Trump and return him to the White House.
Welcome to the legislative arm of the Trump re-election campaign.
Some members of the GOP have called for the FBI to be defunded, a decision Wray said would be disastrous for not only the 38,000 law enforcement personnel who make up the Bureau, but also for American citizens.
We would have hundreds more violent criminals out on the street, dozens more violent gangs terrorizing communities, hundreds more child predators on the loose, hundreds more kids left at those predators' mercy instead of being rescued, scores of threats from the Chinese Communist Party being left unaddressed.
Representative Ken Buck, a Republican from Colorado, questioned Wray over how his bureau can protect Americans while doing a better job of respecting their civil liberties. Buck brought up concerns with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA, specifically when the FBI has used it to monitor Americans without probable cause.
I fear that we are going to overcorrect on FISA in Congress, that we are going to take away some tools that are necessary because there is a trust factor here that's missing.
And we've implemented a whole series of reforms, a lot of the public commentary about our failures. And let's be clear, we have had problems, and those problems are unacceptable, and I'm determined with my leadership team to fix them. But those problems almost entirely predate those reforms, even though some of them have just come out.
Overall, Republicans did not appear to be satisfied with Wray's responses and are expected to push for further reforms within the Bureau. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.
Also in Washington Wednesday, a plea on behalf of persecuted Christians at a hearing on religious freedom. New Jersey Congressman Chris Smith alongside a pastor who led more than 60 Chinese Christians out of China.
This is really a day of great celebration, but it's also an appeal to Xi Jinping and to the UN and to the government here and governments of all democracies to speak out on behalf of religious freedom. This persecution has got to stop.
The story of the Chinese congregation known as the Mayflower Church is one of faith and perseverance. Congressman Smith worked with the pastor of the Shenzhen Holy Reformed Church to find asylum in America after they fled China to South Korea and then Thailand before heading to a new home, which is now in Tyler, Texas. Some positive news for your wallet on inflation, now rising at the lowest annual rate in more than 2 years. But the economy is not out of the woods, as a recession could still be on the way. Mark Martin has this story.
The latest report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows inflation is continuing to drop. Prices rising at a 3% rate, the slowest pace in 2 years. That's thanks in part to lower gas prices, airline fares, grocery costs, and even cheaper used cars. The Consumer Price Index shows price increases easing a year after inflation spiked to its highest level in 4 decades. The inflation rate is down from a 4% annual rate in May. Experts say that means wages are now finally rising faster than prices. Although prices are rising slower, shoppers can still expect some sticker shock compared to pre-pandemic levels.
Prices are still rising for the most part, but they're rising at a slower rate. That is still an obstacle for consumers. You think about building off this ever higher base. I mean, that's a really big deal for bigger ticket items like rent. Shelter costs are actually driving about 70% of that monthly inflation increase. So that's still a real trouble spot.
Plus, prices are still above the Federal Reserve's 2% target. Economists are keeping their eyes on whether this trend continues through the summer. E.J. Anthony of the Heritage Foundation weighed in on CBN's Faith Nation.
Unfortunately, inflation is settling at 3%. It has been trending down, but if you look at the monthly increases over the last year, what you find is that 3% has essentially become the new baseline. In other words, there's no sign that we're going any lower from here on out. There's no sign that we're going to get to that 2% target of the Federal Reserve.
And as far as a potential recession, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says it's not completely off the table. Anthony expressed his concern.
I don't think there's a way out of this without a recession. You can't spend, borrow, and print trillions upon trillions of dollars and not expect any negative consequences. I'm not sure when we forgot that.
Another question is if the decline will affect the Fed's policy of hiking interest rates to bring down inflation. While economists say it appears those hikes are helping, they're still putting the squeeze on Americans trying to pay down credit cards or buy a home or a car. Mark Martin, CBN News.
Still ahead, fighting sex trafficking of children. We're going to hear from the man known as the machine gun preacher about how he's rescuing children in Africa, as well as why the U.S. is one of the worst countries in the world for child trafficking. We're going to have the story for you next. Sound of Freedom is drawing much needed attention to the global human trafficking crisis. It's a $150 billion per year criminal industry affecting 25 million people worldwide. Appearing on this week's episode of The Global Lane, a man known as the machine gun preacher, American missionary Sam Childers explains why after more than 25 years, he's still rescuing children from traffickers in East Africa.
You know, I believe it's a serious problem around the world. Africa has a lot of problem going on, mainly because of the rebels in the bush. But here in America, we got a serious problem going on with it. I will say the president of Uganda, if you get caught molesting children, you get caught raping children, whatever, you're in a serious problem, could even be sentenced to death immediately. So the child trafficking within Uganda It's there, but mainly out around the borders. South Sudan can be a problem. Sudan can be a problem. Any country that has war going on where there's rebel leaders and rebels there fighting, yes, there's a serious traffic problem going on.
And of course, you rescued children from the Lord's Resistance Army and Joseph Kony. Now it's the DRC. Tell us what's happening to children in the DRC.
You know, you have ISIS there, you have Islamic State, and you have ADF. Those people have teamed up together. And so there's a lot going on. You know, it wasn't but a year or two ago ISIS put off a couple bombs inside of Uganda, in the capital city of Kampala.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, we talked to you about that,
Absolutely.
right?
So there's some major things going on. But ISIS, we need to realize that ISIS is a problem around the world. And the big thing with ISIS is if you have your borders open like we do in America, you need to realize they're around us. You know, I don't want to scare anyone, but they are around us. So ISIS is a problem. Now I'm working in an area called Banjibujo. It's right on the border of Congo and Uganda. We're there rescuing children, child soldiers. We're still there doing the same work that we've done for 25 plus years now in East Africa.
How bad is it, though, Sam? Does it compare to the LRA and what they did with children?
You know, I'm going to say no. It is in the Congo. I am not within the Congo working. I'm still on the border of Uganda. There's some serious problems going on. We know there was just recently a school was just raided, and
it was 38 children.
And
the girls, if you remember correctly, what they did with the girls is they hacked them to death with machetes while they were asleep in beds. The boys, they locked into a dormitory and set it on fire.
So where our farm is in northern Uganda, we're building a school, we're building a church, we're building a new marketplace, and we're building a big dormitory to bring those children into that area that's rescued out of that war in the Congo.
And it isn't only Africa. The United States ranks as one of the worst child trafficking countries in the world. Also on the global lane this week, Jessica Vaughn, Director for Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies, was asked the question, just how bad is it? Also this week,
had such a bad problem with child labor trafficking and child sex trafficking. And it is enabled by the Biden administration's policies of catch and release at the border, and then the relocation of the migrants to their destinations with almost no questions asked, no monitoring of what's happening to the kids after they're let out of government custody, and no vetting of the people to whom they're released, and no enforcement at the workplace to detect child trafficking, no incentives for law enforcement agencies to try to disrupt these truly evil rings and individuals who engage in this trafficking. It's all just getting worse because the numbers continue to flow in over the border illegally, and it's really astonishing how much the Biden administration is willing to look the other way at this insidious practice, all to justify its mass immigration policies. There is so much that could be done. It's not something that is a force of nature. It's caused by the Biden policies. It's enriching the cartels who are engaged in this, but it can be stopped if there is a will on the part of the federal government and its partners to do so. But what we see instead is the continued incentivization of child trafficking, with even NGOs, charities, who are engaged supposedly in child welfare, actually enabling this trafficking by participating in turning these kids over to sponsors that they ask no questions of.
These trafficking syndicates also are making a lot of money, smuggling children across the U.S. southern border. Is it only the Mexican cartels, or are other criminal organizations involved in this?
Well, the Mexican cartels control the area right along our border with Mexico, but there are innumerable other organizations that are involved all along the way, whether it's the people who go around in communities in the sending countries and talk people into turning their children over to come to the border, or whether it's the government officials in Mexico and other countries that look the other way when it's coming through their country, whether it is the employers in the United States in the case of labor trafficking, or the people who are participating in the abuse of these minors in sex trafficking.
Also this week on the Global Lane, why Generation Z is opting out of the workforce, and a good news story about Christian singer and evangelist Sean Foyt. You can catch the Global Lane tonight on the CBN News Channel. It begins at 8:30 Eastern. You can also watch it on the CBN News app or on YouTube. We'll be right back with an encouraging word for your day ahead. Stay with us. Time now for your Thursday Thankful, and today I'd love for you to join me in this prayer of gratitude. They're lyrics from an old but still very relevant song. Lord, you're beautiful, your face is all I seek, and when your eyes are on this child, your grace abounds in me. And to that may we all say amen and amen. And with that prayer, may this be an entire Thursday filled with thankfulness. Well, that will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. I want to remind you, you can always find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel. You can find them there at any time, as well as online, cbnnews.com and YouTube. Also, we'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today or any day. You can email us, newswatch@cbn.com. We certainly would love to hear from you. And of course, you can always reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Once again, make this a thankful Thursday and join us right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.